you, Quiet. Thank you, Anne. That's great. So 3 years ago, May, this month, 3 years ago, there was a huge wildfire that swept the city of Fort McMurray. Remember that, folks? It was called the Beast. That's what it was called. The fire started as a forest fire, but very soon it went out of control and burned much of wild forest surrounding the city and destroyed close to 2,000 houses and forced the entire city to evacuate. Now, that's more than 80,000 residents. And then it's shutting down most of the oil refineries up in north of the city. So I was in Edmonton at the time, when the scale of fire increased like 10th time of its initial size and swiftly moved into the city, forcing everyone to escape in a hurry. A mass exodus in a couple of days to south and some up to the north of the city to safe places away from the inferno. Now, while many people in Fort McMurray has already evacuated to the south, on Friday, May 6th, 2016, there was a string of convoys designed to move thousands of people trapped since Tuesday north of Fort McMurray. 1,500 vehicles, 50 at a time, made their way south to safety under police escort through a devastated city shrouded in smoke and threatened with a wild forest fire around. And some of the accounts of people were saying driving through the heart of the fire was the only way to evacuees could link up with Highway 63 and their way south to freedom and safety. So there was much smoke as they drove to south. And some of them were saying it was like a war zone as they were doing that, as what they were driving in that morning. And the visibility was so bad, the drivers often lost sight of the cars driving right in front of them as they crept through the abandoned city. And some of them were saying every now and then they see the taillights and cops were, the police force were there flashing their lights and there were police all over the place. And they had only gone 2 or 3 kilometers and there was a fire right at the side road coming toward them. It was very scary and overwhelming, thick smoke. But some of them were saying, in a way, the thick smoke was a blessing. Thankful that there was so much smoke in the area so you couldn't see everything, the familiar neighborhoods that had been burned down. So in a way, it was kind of blessed they didn't have to witness all of that. And finally, one by one, they all made it to safety, to the big relief. They were able to see the sun and to know that they were out of that inferno. I mean, it was remarkable that as a destructive, widespread, rapid the fire was, and as the whole city and over 80,000 people had to make a mass exodus within 3 days through only 2 highways out, and the fire raging everywhere, that there was no fatality related to fire. No one died related to fire. That every one of them came out of the inferno safely, out of the belly of the beast safely. Thanks to the acts of courage and selflessness and the leadership by so many firefighters and police forces, they were true heroes, served and protected and led people to safety. As I was preparing for this message for today, that scene, that memory just kind of flashed back to me. The fire, that whole commotion that flashed back to me, and I just couldn't help but notice the similarities of the scenes and the text for today. The visions that Apostle John described through the visions and destructions and disasters and apocalyptical scale of fires and disasters of the city of Fort McMurray, just similarities with it. And the convoy of vehicles carrying thousands of people escaping, coming out of the valley of inferno safely, and the similarity to the mass exodus of crowd coming out of great tribulation, tribulation described in today's text, the ones who have washed their cloth in the blood of the Lamb. The text for today reads, the Lamb who was slain will be their shepherd, who will lead them out of the great tribulation, echoing the ancient prayer of King David in Psalm 23, I'm kind of paraphrasing that. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He lay me beside the still water. He leads me into green pasture. Even though I walk through the belly of the beast, I shall not fear, for you are with me. You lead me to safety. You wipe away my tears. So we are on the fourth part of the sermon series on the book of Revelation. And once again, I just want to remind us that the visions and events described are the signs and symbols. Right? What's going to really, it's not what's going to really happen literally, right? Happening at the end. Symbolic reading. So in other words, what I've just described about raging fire scenes that I've just described to you, to compare to visions and descriptions in the book, sort of kind of symbolic explanation, right? That it's going to be literally going to happen in that scale, right? So what the scroll and the four horsemen, trumpets, and the various accompanying plagues in chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and onward, they reveal and represent there are certain truth and principles or patterns or of symptoms that have been plaguing the world we live in. The root causes of what's wrong in the world throughout the history of humankind. What the scroll reveals, what the trumpet blast sounds out, what the plagues expose are the patterns of sickness and wrongs, the evil state of the world we live in under the corrupt forces and powers of the empires. Not literal, but it's a symbolic representation of the state of the world under the evil empires. Now, if you were to read it literally, let's say if you were to read it literally, word by word, you would think that it's God's judgment upon people, right? That's one way to reading it, upon the people in the world. That the plagues and earth-shaking events are going to happen in the end, literally, similar to what happened during Exodus events, right? The plagues and events described here are similar to plagues and events described in the Hebrew Bible. Exodus events and some other prophetic books like the Book of Daniel and Ezekiel during Israel's Babylonian exile. Now, Apostle John is certainly alluding to the Hebrew Bible. Not literally, but alluding to Hebrew Bible, but alluding to the past events symbolically, not literally. So the followers of John, or those Christians and the churches, would have all known what the visions and plagues would mean because they were familiar with the Exodus stories and familiar with exile stories in the Bible. It would be all, it would bring back all the memories. Just for your information, the book of Revelation has more Hebrew Bible allusions, not exact quotations, but allusions than all other New Testament books combined. In other words, John is prophesying the future by alluding back to the past and the past events and stories in the scripture. So it's not literal judgment that God will judge us and destroy the earth at the end. So that's one way a lot of people tend to read. But it's kind of symbolic reading, representations of what's been happening. So here the past, the present, and the future are interlocked and connected as one, symbolically with one overriding theme throughout the book. The sovereignty of God and God's salvation work throughout the history. So one theme, hope, is integral, is the central of the whole book of Revelation. The scroll reveals God's promise to heal and restore the world. But before the healing takes place, the root causes of sickness must be revealed and known. See, we're used to deal with symptoms, aren't we? We used to deal with symptoms, getting rid of symptoms, right? But if we don't deal with the root causes of symptoms, they will come back over and over again, right? In repetitive kind of cycle, right? Certain symptoms are the signs of deeper issues, right? There's a root cause, and unless we tackle the root cause, the symptoms will repeat, and then we end up paying the price. We all know that, right? I was diagnosed with a type 2 diabetes when I was late 30. I didn't know at the time, but I had every symptom. Classic symptoms of a person who was diabetic. I think I had it for about 4 or 5 months, and I didn't really know what that was about. I was always thirsty, literally thirsty, and at all times. So I drank sugary pop, drink, probably a few bottles a day. Every day for a number of weeks, I did that. I went to washroom at least 4 or 5 times in the evening. While I was sleeping, I had to wake up. And then drinking water, and then I thought it was a good thing because you hear this, wisdom, drink a lot of water and pee pale, right? That's what I was doing, right? But I was doing too many times. I was often hungry, very hungry, especially in the morning, even after I ate my breakfast. Hungry to the point I was literally feeling faint and shaking. Could not focus and speak. Often I felt on the edge all the time, sweating. And my heartbeat went up and down. And of course, I lost about 25 pounds of my weight in 2 months, and I wasn't even dieting. I didn't know what was going on. The classic symptoms of a person having this kind of sudden diabetic condition. So my wife's wife, Sue, told me, actually sort of kind of warned me. She said something like, I think you need to go see a doctor. You know my aunt? Yeah, she had very similar symptoms like you did. And I said, I thought she died. And Sue said, yes, she did. So I went to the doctor right away that afternoon. The doctor took my urine sample and your blood sample, and he called me 2 hours later. They don't call you 2 hours later, right? He called me like 2 hours later after my visit. He said, must come. He told me I was diabetic, and he told me about half of my urine sample was kind of sugary. So he prescribed me the metformin medication. So my blood sugar was like way off the chart. And good thing I found out before I was too late, thanks to my wife, which is my savior. Certain symptoms are the signs of deeper issues. Right? Getting rid of the symptoms won't make us better. The symptoms will come back over and over and worse than before, and soon we will face the final consequences. There's underlying causes for symptoms we see on the surface in social issues and cultural, political, and society. And when we like a poverty issue, like a homelessness issue, isolation and loneliness issues, the rising of mental illness and suicides, and a widening gap between rich and poor. These are the symptoms of deeper root causes. So, as you know, I go to Starbucks, and where I live, there's Starbucks right in front of, there's a Denman and Davy right over there. So I go over there quite often, and I see this, I think it's like middle-aged man, quite large. And he's been sitting in there's a bus stop with a shelter, and he's been sitting there that place was like his shelter, his own home and his own shelter where he stays. He's been staying there ever since like about 6 months, since last year, wintertime. And he would come into the Starbucks back and forth, and there are two reactions from people usually. One reaction is people try to avoid him, right? Because he smells. This person has been taking a shower forever, right? So you smell from like far away, so you try to avoid. So there's one kind of reaction. There are other person, a lot of people who are very compassionate. They would actually help him to actually go into Starbucks and buy him some coffee and some food and all that. So he's been kind of feeling kind of a community sort of over there. He's been sitting over there, and so it's like his home, all that place. It's like if you go over there, you will see him. It's very it's kind of almost like he's like landmark. You go there, you see it right there, sitting there. So And you think that that's the only one problem, but then you go down to downtown Vancouver East, right? And thousands of people are like it, right? Thousands of people. And then you realize it's more than just individual. One person is a problem, right? It's much more, much deeper. It's much more social, economical, political, and relational, and moral issue, right? The cause, the root of the cause is much more. And feeding people like that and housing them is just one of the solutions, right? We are tackling the symptoms when we do that, which we need to do, but we also need to ask ourselves, is it getting any better or worse? Repetitive cycle. We need to see the system and structural issues, underlying causes, and begin to tackle, right? How the empires of this world, the evil kind of, when I say empire, I'm not talking about one nation. I think empires, the system, is where it is shaping the lives of people. The scroll in the book of Revelation represents God's promise to heal, remedies to the world state. But before the remedies and healing can be done, the wrongs and the evil forces need to be exposed, to be uncovered and revealed before they can be tackled. That's what first four seals reveal, the evil state of the world, the state of what has been wrong throughout history in every generation and every empire. There are four horsemen. When you read that, four horsemen of each seal, once they break the seal, then one horseman emerges, right? These four horsemen are the ancient patterns of conquest, violence, and oppression, and death. And when the fifth seal is opened, we see all those people of God crying out, calling out, how long, God, how long? This has been the cry of God's people over the centuries. How long, how long? Lord, how long? Echoes down through the centuries. This cry is echoed in our own day as well, in our own families, in our churches, and the world around us. You see, in every powerful and oppressive empire in the history, there has always been represented sort of a four horsemen of representation at the core of their rise and fall. This ancient pattern of conquest, violence, and oppression, and death. For example, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire began with a military expansion and conquest, and then breakdown and decentralization of institutions of every level. There's a political, social, racial, and class separation and violence happened. And there's been an economic meltdown due to overexpanding and expansion and deep separation between rich and poor. And of course, subsequent moral decay and corruptions and inevitable fall of the empire. Usually takes about 250 years to 300 years to rise and fall. That's what the historians usually will tell you. This pattern of conquest, violence, and oppression and death, the four horsemen were at the core of rise and fall of every powerful empire in history, and it's kind of including our own time. I'm not a historian, and I'm not a politician, I'm not a sociologist. I just read some of the researches, what the people, expert people are saying. They're saying the signs are everywhere. The fall of the empire, the signs and symptoms of the decline of especially Western culture, Western empire, North American empire, are very clear, is what they say. There's a military expansion and conquest, political, social, cultural unrest and breakdown, financial trouble and corruption, the widening gap between rich and poor, and with extreme overspending of luxurious lifestyle that many of us have been accustomed to. And then people are wondering how long you think we can sustain this sort of lifestyle. How long? I just did an officiated wedding yesterday to young people who were Hong Kong background, and there were a whole bunch of people with it. So that was a great wedding. Just guess how much we usually spend in our weddings in North America. Just guess how much we spend on weddings itself. Generally, in North America, we spend around $30,000. That's a general average. Okay? That's like 6 times more money for wedding than Europeans spend. They usually spend around $5,000 for something. $30,000. Guess how much you think when I married my daughter, we spent? Too much. Not 30,000, but too much anyway. But compared to Europeans and Americans, Koreans tend to spend much more for wedding in Korea, especially for groom. If you are a groom part, not only for wedding, but for like you have to, they say 3 keys you must bring. Like, your condo key, your car key, and then your savings account key. So many will not be able to get married. Comes down to that. There's a new trend in Korea. The young people are living single, living simple, living with less. Not because they want to, but they don't have any other choice. I just had a meeting with our conference, regional visiting team to Korea to prepare for the regional meeting in 2 weeks. We will have some presentation over there in Langan. One of the discussions that we had regarding how we are going to go ahead with a future relationship with Korea was to bring the younger generations from both parts together in some forms and have some conversation, have some sort of programs from Korean young people and Canadian young people. And so what's the kind of common ground? What's the common ground for them to actually have some dialogue and conversation? And both of them, when we went over there, and one minister who actually ministered toward young adults in Canada as well, very common issue that they face. Young people in both countries, there's overwhelming sense of helplessness and bleak outlook into the future. Both sides. They both are saying the same thing, that there is not much future for that generation. Very daunting and they're very bleak when they look at their future. Our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren is very pessimistic about their future. And kind of, as parents, you're kind of concerned about the future of our next generation. I mean, our generation has been kind of well off, right? We've been well off. In a way, we have created this unsustainable economy. Like we're like leaving behind terrible environmental legacy. I'm kind of worried about our next generation in this sense. The word that they will receive will be very unfriendly word, a reality, a really apocalyptic future that they will receive. So instead of just taking this, dealing with the symptoms, we need to actually take a look at what's causing all this and begin to tackle the structural and systematic pattern and way. In a way that what John describes in his vision, the state of the world under the Roman Empire is not aligned with the state of the world we live in 21st century in North America. And the persecution against Christians then would come to us more persuasion and compromising our moral values, and to be served by the infernal force of empire. That's more of our challenge. It's not that we're being persecuted, that we are being persuaded. We are being compromised, the values of the empires that are really creating unbearable future for our younger generation. So our challenge as church and Christians is to see the signs, what Apostle John described, seeing the signs in our own time. And we like all those Christians, and for down through the generation, they've been praying, how long, God? It's like for more of us, it's not only about prayer, but also for us to commit to act on dealing and tackling these root causes, and offering ourselves for the sake of the Lamb, who has given his life to save the saved. So that's sort of kind of text for today, and I'm kind of lecturing today. So that's kind of, I don't usually lecture. I mean, this form of things lecture. I'm not lecturing. You know what I'm talking about, right? So it's kind of boring. As I was doing this, I'm kind of bored anyway. So, but it's very important for us to actually get grip of that root causes. It's to see the bigger picture of what's happening, And it's kind of call for the church and each one of us to actually, what's our response? And what's our right response? Not being compromised by the values of it. So in your insert, there's a Bible study questions for about 10 questions. That will be for the next part 5. And I kind of assuming you to read a few chapters in between. For next 2 weeks, you will have a break. So some of you probably will say, wow, that's a relief. Okay, that's good. So kind of for me, kind of relief as well. So take some time, and if you, I would really encourage you to actually go back to a website and just listen a few more times, and to try to grasp. And it's, as I prepare this, I'm learning a lot, and I hope that you'll be able to learn that as well along the way. So we go through this together.